Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 139, with Matthew Raidbard talking about supporting college student athletes. Really enlightening conversation for me. Never really been exposed to that world as a lifelong geek nerd, whatever you want to call it, but do understand, appreciate the really valuable and meaningful learning outcomes and just development that can happen for athletes when they are probably supported by good coaches and just really intentional experiences and reflection. So we talk all about that and about Matthew's book, Lead Like a Pro. So definitely go check that out. Connect with Matthew to keep the conversation going. Check out the merch stores. We're heading into the end of the year. Grab some great gifts for yourself or other fans of the show. It's a great way to support us. There's some good sales going on. And also, as a heads up, as we're entering into the end of the year, the end of this season will be on November 10th. That'll be our last episode. We'll take our usual sort of bi-weekly, every other week cadence. So this will be the episode. We'll be off next week, and then the 10th will be the finale for season 5 of the podcast. So look forward to that. Appreciate everybody's support throughout this entire year. And without further ado, this is episode number 139 with Matthew Raidbard. All right, so we are here as we are winding down the season, continuing our trend to talk through some interesting new topics that we've not discussed on the show before. So I'm super excited. I know I'll get a lot out of this conversation. So, the topic at hand here is student leadership, athletics, where those things intersect. But we'll start it as we always do with the introductions, professional journey of our guest. So if you want to kick us off, Matthew, then we'll go from there.
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here talking with you. For me, my journey has professionally has always been an intersection of kind of athletics and students and academics. I started my professional career as a men's college basketball coach right out of college. Got my first job at Western New Mexico University, a small Division II school down in the southwest corner of New Mexico. And it really was always my dream to be a college basketball coach. I always loved college basketball, but, really loved working with college students, kind of preparing them for that next step in their lives. And, it was kind of one of those things where I didn't really know what I wanted to do, have a really clear idea of what I wanted to do when I was graduating college. But I knew I loved basketball. I knew I loved coaching. And I was really fortunate to be able to break in and pursue that dream.
Yeah, that's really great. I mean, it's a world, again, I'm not super familiar with, but I know, just experience that a lot of students have, it's a way for them to even get to college in the first place. And then it can add such a great dynamic to their experience in terms of teamwork and communication and leadership and, just a way to stay active, have fun, and, kind of work towards a goal, and have that achievement and everything. So, it's something, like you said, it's been kind of ingrained in you since the beginning of your professional journey. And I know you have a book, so I want to kind of give a shout out to it, give it some time and space here to talk about it, called Lead Like a Pro. So how did that book come to be? And if you just want to explain kind of what the sort of abstract of it is, what's the idea behind the book?
My kind of professional journey has had a lot of kind of twists and turns that I didn't really know or going in were possible, or, when they were happening, didn't even entirely know how important those moments were going to be. But, I kind of was able to move through coaching and get a lot of different experiences in coaching. I was a coach at 4 different schools, bigger, smaller, low resource, high resource. Just, I was able to get a really nice amalgam of different experiences. But the kind of constant throughout that time as a coach, and then when I transitioned into athletics administration as well, was I didn't feel like coaches, administrators were receiving enough leadership training that was specific or designed for them. I always thought during my time as a coach, and this kind of relates back to my first job at Western New Mexico. When I got there, I was so excited that I was going to be a full-time coach. And I thought everything that I was going to do, I thought I was going to recruit and coach on the court, and everything would be centered around basketball and, on-court coaching and games and practices. And I remember about a month into the start of my coaching career down at Western Mexico, I remember talking to my dad and him asking me how things were going, and me saying, they're going pretty well. I like the team, school, coaches, student athletes, but when am I going to get to do all of those coaching things that I thought I was going to do when I first got here? I was wearing so many other hats. I was a study hall monitor and a class checker and a chauffeur and a nutritionist and a mentor and a friend, and I was doing all of these other things, and I didn't entirely identify what that meant at the time, but I kind of quickly realized, shortly into my career, that I needed a broader range of leadership tools to be able to help me on my professional journey while I was wearing all these other hats, taking on all these other leadership responsibilities. And so it kind of, from that first kind of seminal experience and that kind of idea formulating in my head that, where can I get some help? Where can I get more tools that can aid me in this process? And every year I was taking on more and more of these responsibilities that I wasn't necessarily equipped for. And it was becoming harder and harder. And it was kind of through that, my professional journey, feeling that way, and then getting into administration, conducting research on athletic coach leadership practice, that I eventually was inspired to write the book as a resource for coaches to be able to give them leadership knowledge and tools to help them on their leadership journeys, on their professional journeys, and just hopefully make sure that they're better equipped to take on all of those different leadership responsibilities.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I can imagine that is a common story for a lot of people where, I mean, and really any organization, honestly, responsibility thrust upon you, and you sort of have to learn to an extent as you go, because sometimes there's just not, the best leadership training or management training, when you do have to sort of corral and direct a group of people. It certainly could be really hard work, and, to manage all those different personalities and just different stakeholder priorities and all these sort of things. So I appreciate you kind of reflecting and putting all that together and sharing out your wisdom and advice with folks. So, but yeah, I mean, obviously the crux of this is that this experience for students, like I said, can be really impactful. I kind of alluded to, I think, my perception of the things that sort of the skills and things that students can learn from this experience. But from your point of view, kind of working in this space firsthand, how do you see this involvement in athletics being impactful for college students? Kind of all this work and thought and intentionality that goes into this, it's for a purpose. It's kind of creating these, meaningful outcomes for students. So, what are some of those outcomes?
Yeah, so I think that there's a tremendous number of opportunities for students to kind of gain a lot of different attributes and character traits and mentalities and experiences through athletics. I mean, being part of a team, working collaboratively, hard work, time management, organization, also understanding your unique population and kind of working through some of those difficulties. Not everybody is a fan of athletics. Not everybody is going to go out of their way to understand your perspective and your individual challenges. So working through some of those things as well. I think there's so many things that can be learned or that are learned from being an athlete and participating in sports that are, but I think that what goes along with that hand in hand is, while a lot of those things can be gained by the individual student and picked up on over time and developed over time, certainly when the leadership abilities and the mentoring abilities of their coaches are more intentional, more focused on developing some of those skills, abilities, characteristics, it helps the students, it helps the student athlete understand the importance of them. It helps them really realize, hopefully earlier on, what they are gaining from participating in sports, and then starting to apply it earlier on, as opposed to waiting later till they sort of have figured out what the influence or importance of it was and the impact that they can have. Taking those, character traits and those opportunities and experiences and putting them right back out into practice in their own teams, their own lives, their own classrooms, with their friends, with people in their network, moving towards networking to, get a job and kind of go beyond college and into that next phase of their life. So, I think the intersection of those two things is so important, and the kind of fostering of those leadership abilities and characteristics and traits is so important and can be so heavily influenced when you have a coach who really understands that and is intentional about their own leadership decisions so that they can help best foster that within the students themselves.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned just the idea too of like, these are transferable skills. They can manifest and be beneficial to our personal lives and professional lives. It's, you know, certainly prudent just so that like, okay, this person grows and they can become a better athlete, for however long they, are engaged with that in college or elsewhere. But, the things you learn on the field, on the court, wherever, have that value in so many other places, and just, helping people to reflect and understand that and feel really confident, that whatever they learn can have that transferability. And yeah, I mean, the coach plays a crucial role in that and helping to kind of guide that. So that's kind of what I wanted to ask about next. Obviously it's a big focus, like you said, what your book is about and everything, but, I don't want to steal any of the book's thunder, but if you kind of want to tease, I guess, some sort of the, just broader advice of like, how the coach kind of plays into this whole equation of helping students achieve those outcomes and those sort of things, just anything that you'd want to share about, advice that you'd give to coaches working with college students.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so many of these things, I tell people all the time, I was a coach and an administrator and have spent my professional career in athletics. But, for me, that's the lens through which I view leadership, because that's where my experiences are. But, like you said, for leaders in all areas, business and teachers and, all sorts of professions, you're looking at leadership through your own unique perspective and scope. And obviously you're working with different populations of people. But ultimately, the fundamental aspects of leadership are the same. So we all need to determine what is the best leadership style for us. And, I talk through a couple of steps for anyone trying to develop their leadership practice, of just starting off with identifying and determining what are your kind of personal values and beliefs as a leader. What's fundamental to who you are and you want to be displayed through your leadership, through your decisions, through how you communicate and treat people. For me, it was always really important to me as a coach, and it continues to be as an administrator, that, I'm very positive. I always try to be inspirational and motivational for my athletes. I try to do that for my team as well. Build really strong personal relationships. That was one of the most important things to me as a coach, was I wanted to build those personal relationships with my athletes so that we had a relationship of mutual trust and respect, but also so that they knew I supported them, not just as athletes, but as human beings, and that our relationship was going to transcend our time as player coach. That when they went out and they left campus and I was no longer their coach, I was still going to be their coach. I was still going to be their support system. I was still going to be there for them and do what I could to help them. Those are really important aspects of my personal values and beliefs as a person and as a leader. So kind of identifying those as the foundation or the starting point for my leadership practice. Now, once I learn about foundational leadership knowledge, once I gain an understanding of different leadership styles, I can then take those personal values and beliefs and start to match them with leadership styles that kind of will help accentuate those and help me practice them and have them come through in my behaviors. So, for me, I naturally gravitated towards transformational leadership because there was a lot of different overlap with that leadership style and what was important to me as a leader. And then that became kind of the foundation of my leadership practice. And from there, it was about acquiring the tools to then go out and say, okay, these are my values and beliefs as a leader. I identify a lot with transformational leadership as a foundational style for me. Now I need to go out and I actually need to be inspirational and motivational. I need to build those relationships and acquire the tools and some tips and tricks and an understanding of how to actually go and do that. And that's kind of the process I walk coaches through in the book, and really anybody who's trying to develop their leadership practice. Because ultimately, I can't tell anyone in any profession, here's the best leadership style for you. Ultimately, that's developed over time, and it's a very personal thing. Every leader has a different leadership style because every leader is different. And, it's informed by their knowledge, their experiences, their values and beliefs. So I tried to write the book as kind of a menu to say, here's how to kind of figure out what's important to you as a leader. Here are some really great leadership styles that might, will hopefully align with a lot of your values and beliefs. And here's some tools and some more information on how to then go and practice those leadership styles and behaviors so that you could become the leader that you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that mentality too, where it's like, it's not one size fits all. Like there may be one that seems a bit more relevant to a lot of folks than others, but that you can give this menu of options, people can kind of read through, see what resonates. And it might be that it's something that's like, the Dustin style of leadership where it's like, I kind of take a little bit of here and there or whatever, but like, it's good to also be able to like focus and say like, well, if I really ever really am, in doubt, I can anchor around this style to help guide decision making and, how am I going to show up for my team and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's the way it has to be, is that you give options and ultimately a decision is up to the individual to figure out what leadership style is going to work best for them. But yeah, I mean, this is all great stuff. And I think it just is that ability, for folks, for coaches to like kind of rise above the fray and like, in this context, it's similar, I think, to any other kind of work, is that like, we can get so stuck in the day to day and just like, what's the next problem? But like being able to really have a thoughtful strategy around, how am I going to help transform the people on my team to become leaders themselves, or just get to wherever they're going in the best way possible, versus just kind of, treating symptoms of things, or just kind of taking each thing as it comes. So, and I guess, the time that we're in, all of this, I think, has probably only become a bit more difficult to navigate, given just the pandemic and kind of, things being shut down, reopening, kind of, with other kind of safety measures and things. So, I always just like to honor that, like, we can talk about things sort of like in a vacuum, but I think making sure they're applicable to sort of the reality that we're all facing day to day. So just, if you want to kind of at least just look back, how maybe the pandemic has disrupted your work and, the work of others that you speak with in the kind of athletics world. And yeah, just advice for folks kind of moving forward as they sort of honor, the disruptions that have happened.
Yeah, I think that there have been a lot of different challenges for a lot of people in athletics and higher ed. I think, a couple of the things that come to mind for me is, first off, I think in athletics, we kind of have a saying in athletic departments that I've worked in that, athletics never closes. Athletics never takes a day off. There's always something going on. There's always something happening. Coaches need something, student athletes, staff, something is always going on. And I think one thing that, the pandemic did was especially when people were separated, people were at home, working from home, they're meeting virtually, they're on the phone a lot, there's not that kind of in-person interaction, is one, I think, and I could speak for myself here a little bit as a leader, that I lost a little bit of those opportunities to really develop relationships with my team and with our student athletes. It's definitely a different dynamic when you're meeting with people and you're conversing with them through kind of non-traditional mediums, on the phone, text message, over, virtually, and you're not just face to face, in an office or a room, just sitting there person to person and just talking. So I think you lose a little something there, and I think you have to work a little harder at building those relationships and making sure that people know you're there for them and supporting them. I think kind of on the same side, or the kind of the flip side of that, is, I think it became more difficult for people to have boundaries and really develop where some of those boundaries were with their team, their colleagues, athletes, to say that, because we're at home, it almost felt at times like we were always on, we're always at work, because everything was so mixed and overlapped. I mean, I would go from a meeting to putting dishes away to now I'm back on the phone to walking the dog. And, And there's this overlap of my life and work in ways that there never was before, and those boundaries were gone. There wasn't an opportunity to leave work and have work end to the extent that that's possible in today's society. So I think that there were those kind of competing factors where you're trying to be accessible and support people and build relationships and have people know you're there for them, and understanding what they're going through, and being supportive, but also being able to have those boundaries so that you do still have some semblance of a work-life balance. I think those have definitely been two things that I could speak to for me that have been a challenge, especially in a leadership role, because, I set a tone and an example through my behaviors for my team. And, if my team sees that they're getting emails from me at 10 o'clock at night, even though my intention is not to say that they should be working, it's the opposite. I don't want them to be doing what I'm doing. I want them to have a better work-life balance than me. But it sends that kind of, sometimes unhealthy message of, look what our leader is doing, and then people feeling like they have to kind of replicate that. They need to do that as well. So I think sometimes you get some of those unintended consequences of your leadership actions, and maybe me not having really good boundaries, and then that being reflected in my behaviors and affecting the team, and kind of making it so it's difficult for them to have boundaries, which is exactly the opposite thing that I want as a leader. So I think a lot of those things can get kind of muddled, and it can be really difficult as a leader to make sure that I understand the decisions I'm making, and therefore I can track what are the positives and negatives, and then make adjustments. I think sometimes during this time, it's kind of been jumping from problem to problem to problem to problem, and you kind of lose track sometimes of the effect of those leadership decisions are having, especially over the course of time.
I mean, I think that's a little bit of what everybody's been facing. Those things you mentioned around, the work gets done when it can get done, and not making that like an expectation for anybody. But yeah, just always trying to manage flexibility with what needs to get done, and giving people the grace that they need through this difficult time, and still just trying to deliver, to our teams, to our colleagues, to our other customers, constituents, students, everybody, delivering as high quality of a experience as we can, given the circumstances. But yeah, I mean, and there's a lot. I always don't want to open up a can of worms of like all the other stuff I feel like has been changing in college athletics. But maybe if you want to allude to any like helpful resources, in addition to your book, of course, and connecting with you, but anything else that's like grabbing your attention, maybe with all of the big headlines in the athletics world, or just other stuff that you feel is good, like foundational leadership resources that we can include in the show notes.
Yeah, I think what has really been a positive that's come out of the last year and a half or 2 years is there have been all of these different resources popping up that are very accessible to people. So for me, there's a lot of whether it's the talks through Athletic Director U or Lead One's webinars. There's all these organizations that are putting out a lot of really good content that I always tell my team and colleagues, sign up for everything. You're not necessarily going to watch it now or listen to it now, but it may be applicable for you later. So whether it's podcasts or webinars, there's just so much content that's being put out on a lot of different topics facing college athletics, higher education right now, that I kind of just, again, I'm an information gatherer, so I'm just big on, that looks interesting. I'm gonna make sure that I sign up and bookmark it for when I have time. That could be applicable to my colleagues or other coaches. I'm going to send it off to them and encourage them to do it. I just think as you kind of keep gathering information, it's so important. But for me, it's a lot of these kind of individual podcasts or webinars or different trainings that have come up, 45 minutes, an hour, and then being able to go back and kind of pick through what is interesting to me or applicable to me. And, everybody's going to have different kind of organizations. Those are just two that I like their content and, speaks well, I think speaks really well to what the needs are of, coaches and administrators in higher ed right now. But again, I think that those type of things are really good. And I always encourage people, again, like I wrote my book through a coaching lens, but I hope that people who are not coaches will also read it and learn from it, because I think it's so important for people to look for resources, leadership resources outside of their field, and see through the lens of what other leaders are doing in other professions, and look for those resources. So I encourage people to just, I'll from time to time I'll just Google business leadership or different kind of keywords to try to just find resources, or ask my friends who are in different professions for what they're reading or what they're listening to, just to get some different resources, to be able to kind of just get a fresh lens and perspective on how other people might be seeing some of the same things that I am, but just through a different lens.
Yeah. Oh, great advice and great resources there. And yeah, I mean, teamwork is teamwork to an extent. Like there's certain, kind of truisms and adages that can be helpful just to sort of focus our work and trying to do those things better. So I really appreciate that sentiment and advice. So we always like to end though. If there's any other kind of final thoughts, calls to action that you'd like to share out to wrap up the episode, the floor is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is definitely my favorite part. I'll say a couple of things. One is it's never too late to change your leadership behaviors, to adjust your leadership style if it's not working for you. Even if you don't have great boundaries right now, if you feel like your work-life balance isn't great, that doesn't mean that even though you've been doing that for the last year and a half or 2 years of everything that's been going on, that you can't change it. But the greatest impact of change comes through your behaviors and your actions more than your words. So, for me, I always encourage people to, if you want to say, this is what I'm going to do, or this is what I intend to do, that's great. It lets people know before you just start doing it. But ultimately, as a leader, they're then going to look through your actions and behaviors as follow-up to see if you're actually doing it. And they're going to see if you're doing it over time. So, it's not easy to kind of change those behaviors, especially when they've been ingrained in you for a long time as a leader. But it's never too late, and it's never impossible for you to make those adjustments. If you feel like, whether it's work-life balance, your communication style, how you work collaboratively as a leader, your approach to leadership, it's never too late to make those changes or adjustments. And I encourage people always to, even if you feel like your leadership practice is going really well, and your things are going really well with your team, there are always ways to kind of look at your leadership practice introspectively and learn something new and be able to make changes or adjustments just to continue to evolve as a leader. I think it's so important that leaders are always looking to evolve, even when they feel like things are going well. They're not going to go well forever. Challenges are going to come up. People are going to change. The needs of your team is going to change. So whereas you may not necessarily need to make any adjustments at that time, getting that information, gaining that knowledge, seeing those different perspectives, it's only going to help you as you kind of continue your leadership journey and continue to evolve as a leader. And then, the other thing I'll just leave everybody with that is really central to the book and also kind of everything that I talk about is, there are no perfect leaders. There's no perfect leadership style. Ultimately, the leader that you are today might not be the leader you are in a year or 5 years or 10 years. As you continue to change, you continue to get new experiences. The needs of the people you're working with continue to change. But ultimately, I want leaders to know, and everyone to know, that don't judge yourself as a leader based on, did I succeed or did I fail, right? Really focus in on the process over the outcome as much as possible, and really look at, did I, even though maybe I didn't get the outcome that I wanted, did I make what I think were the best leadership decisions? Did I really think hard about what the needs of my organization, my team, my students was, and did I make decisions in pursuit of that, even if it didn't work out? And then, on the flip side of that, say, okay, even though it did work out, were there some changes? Were there different things I could have done so that the outcome I got was more replicable, or we got there, in a little bit of an easier or more efficient way, or I remained more true to who I am as a leader? So again, really encouraging people to really look at and think about the process and their own decisions that led to the outcomes, more than just judging themselves based on what the outcomes of their leadership decisions were.
Yeah, I love it. The consistency, the reflection, the modeling the way, all those important milestones and sort of foundations for just good leadership in general. So thank you so much for hanging out and sharing all that you did, Matthew. We'll have ways to connect with you and everything that you mentioned down in the show notes as usual. But just great stuff. And I appreciate just a little bit of time here to talk about and explore just leadership and student athletics and all that good stuff. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I love what you're doing with the podcast. I think it's such an important intersection that you're discussing here on the podcast, and really glad I could come on and be a part of it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.